And greetings, my friends, and welcome. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh, the EIB Network, and the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. Always a thrill and a delight to be with you. Truly is. A telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882, and the email address, lrushbaugh@eibnet.com. I mentioned some of the gaffes yesterday President Obama made while appearing on The Tonight Show. Oh, by the way, you know, it's a little fascinating little story here, folks, a column by Chris Cillizza in the Washington Post, be the Washington Post for Newt Gingrich. And it is headlined, "Why Nobody Should Be Surprised That Jay Leno Asked Obama Real Questions." Now, yesterday on this program, about 24 hours ago, I observed that I think this was the first time in my lifetime that a president of the United States had gone on a late-night comedy show to address the American people about something of potentially grave consequence. I mean, shutting down 21 embassies for a week in the Middle East is not an insignificant thing. And I pointed out Jack Paar show did not feature John F. Kennedy. JFK did not go on Jack Paar to tell the American people about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it just seemed to be emblematic of the plunge that the country is making in its devotion to the pop culture, low information segment of our country. Now, nothing against Leno. I mean, I want to stress again, good get for him. Get the president, that's cool. This is a White House decision. I'm not being critical of Leno at all. And I was not at all surprised that Leno would ask better questions than the White House press corps does. I've been a guest on The Tonight Show and when Leno had his primetime show. And I know when I'm there, all he does is ask tough questions. There isn't any comedy unless I interject it. I know he's capable of it, and I wasn't surprised that he did it. But usually in the past, when presidents have gone on comedy shows, not during moments of great import, but just a casual appearance, which, by the way, is relatively new in and of itself. That's, I don't think George H.W. Bush went on any of these shows. Clinton, I think, playing the sax on Arsenio Hall might have been the icebreaker, certainly in the modern era, which is not surprising. I don't know if W went on a late-night comedy show or not. George W. Bush. Don't remember. My memory is that he doesn't. Anyway, whenever this would happen in the past, even when Clinton did it, the mainstream media would have a cow. Because comedians are comedians. I mean, this isn't serious. The president of the United States is a serious guy. It's a serious job. And what's he doing talking to a comedian? And they considered it a sellout by a president to do it. Because you're going up before a low information audience. You got a host who is not going to supposedly drill down for the really tough questions. And it was viewed almost as an act of cowardice by a president to do it in the eyes of the mainstream media. Now, all of a sudden, Chris Cillizza, headlined Washington Post, again for Newt Gingrich, Washington Post, why no one should be surprised that Jay Leno asked President Obama tough questions. And he says here that the overwhelming sentiment coming out of Obama's interview with Jay Leno can be summed up like this. Wow, Jay really asked serious questions. Russia, Edward Snowden. By the way, Mr. Cillizza, the real news of that appearance was not the questions, but the answers. And the gaffes, which we're going to get back to here in just a second. I don't want you to think I've lost my place. Cillizza writes, Russia, Edward Snowden, the NSA were part of the conversation. So, too, was the increased terror alert. and Hillary Clinton's presidential prospects. There was relatively little, hey, how are the wife and kids chatter that many people expected. Leno did ask Obama how he spent his birthday. It wasn't a totally dry interview. No one who has watched the transformation of media and how politicians have learned to take advantage of those things should be surprised, however, Mr. Saliza says. Because here is, according to him, the reality. As the definition of who is a journalist has continued to expand, the line between serious and fun has blurred. There are examples of this phenomenon everywhere. The success of BuzzFeed, the rise of The Daily Show, the Colbert Report, primary news source for many young people. As we have written before in this space, the idea that a serious journalist cannot have fun is not one that's broadly held by the people who, consume our journalism. Leno's interview with Obama proves the opposite's also true, that a fun person can also be serious. Now, it's risky for me to get into this because it could be misunderstood, but the Rush Limbaugh TV show was The Daily Show, before The Daily Show. This radio program has always been something that, prior to it, really didn't exist in major national media, and I attempted to explain this now and then in the early days when a mainstream journalist would interview me, back in the days when I thought being interviewed was an opportunity to inform them and educate them, which it isn't and wasn't. But I would tell them what I do. They were not interested in hearing what I had to say. All they wanted to do was take shots at, make fun of, or disagree with what my answer to them was. But the thing I said to them was that I do something that you don't find elsewhere in the media. I combine the serious discussion of issues with irreverent, satirical comedy, with credibility on both sides. And I would say, you imagine if Letterman came out one night and actually did a serious monologue for 5 minutes, people watching that show would not know what to do. They wouldn't know how to react. That's not why they're watching. They don't tune to Letterman for anything serious. Ditto Ted Koppel and Nightline. If people came out and watched Ted Koppel and he opened Nightline with a 10-minute joke routine a la Carson or Leno, people wouldn't know what to do. That's not why they're watching. And by the same token, if The Tonight Show started and Johnny Carson came out and did 10 minutes of drop-dead serious politics, people wouldn't know what to do. And I tell these journalists in the early day of the program, this is what I do. I do both those things with credibility. The fact that I do satire and irreverent humor does not take away from the credibility I have with my audience when I discuss things seriously. But because of that, in the early days, I think it even survives to this point, the media still used the fact that there was a lot of comedy on this program to poke holes. Well, Limbaugh just an entertainer. I mean, I don't know why the Republican Party pays so much attention to Limbaugh. He's just an entertainer. I mean, you still hear that today. He's just an entertainer, meaning you can't take him seriously. And then something will happen, and the next week I will be the titular head of the Republican Party. But my point here is that all kinds of allowances are being made for the watering down of journalism in order to accommodate Obama. That is the point that's being made. Normally, and you can go back and you can look, that a Washington Post, New York Times columnist would be really upset at a president who appeared more often on comedy shows than he did in the White House press room or doing formal press conferences. You can go back and you can find that would have, if George W. Bush, in the middle of the war in Iraq, or after Abu Ghraib had gone on Leno or Letterman to explain, the Washington Press Corps would have had a field day ripping Bush to shreds for doing that, for being a coward in avoiding them. And then you would be able to read a little jealousy and envy for whatever late-night host show that Bush had appeared on. But now that it's Obama, well, guess what? Well, journalism's changing. Oh, yeah, even the funny can be serious. Oh, yeah. It ain't any big deal, and it's what's Liz's point here. He said nobody should be surprised that Leno asked Obama real questions. No, really? It wasn't that long ago you would have been ticked off that Obama wasn't making himself available to you for these so-called serious questions. But whatever Obama does, whatever standard is being destroyed or blown up, has to be tolerated in order to accommodate Obama. Because what this really means is there's nothing wrong with Obama going on a comedy show. What's wrong with that? Well, I maintain to you that it's not a serious thing to do. It's not the place to have discussed what Obama was going to. But that's just me and my tip of my hat to tradition, but also the idea that I take foreign policy and the office of the presidency pretty seriously. It's not something to be joked about and watered down with for the sake of building a bridge of compatibility to the low information population. But that's what it's being used as. So, given now that it's perfectly fine, we shouldn't be surprised that Leno asked tough questions, and we shouldn't be surprised that Obama went there, because the definition of a journalist is expanding. And that, of course, is happening to accommodate whatever Obama does, because we cannot, if we're in the drive-by media, we cannot criticize the imperial President Barack Obama. No way, no how. It cannot happen. In fact, I'll even make this, if the president today were George W. Bush, and George W. Bush had gone on to Leno and gotten the same questions that Leno asked Obama, I don't think that we'd be reading today about how Leno asked Bush tough questions or real questions. I think that the drive-bys would categorize Leno as lobbing softballs at Bush if George W. Bush got the same kind of questions from Leno that Obama got. Because if Bush had gone on there, if Leno didn't say, how come you didn't care that 3,000 people died in Iraq? How come the world hates, all these stereotypical templates and narratives that they think were true. If Leno hadn't brought them up, then it would have been a softball interview. So it just means, folks, that standards not worth much anymore. Standards declining left and right. Doesn't matter. Whatever necessary to prop up Obama.